This month, a huge event came and went. The COP27 took out some of the biggest headlines in the news this month. And for those that don't know what it is, it's Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement. This month, we'll be breaking down the takeaways, the good, the bad, the ugly, some of which honestly really surprised me and I didn't see coming, and others that really just made a lot of sense. But before we get into all that, we're going to start with some headlines, personal updates, and of course, we've got the sustainability tip and the good news segment later on. Hello and welcome to the Plant Paradigm Podcast, where we talk about all things sustainability, climate change, and environmentalism. I'm your host, Tom Simak, a fellow plant eater and athlete who strives to optimize every living ecosystem. Passionate about looking after this beautiful floating rock we call home and all the lovely creatures that dwell among it. Today's episode is the monthly Paradigm, a bit more of a news debrief compared to the usual influx of weekly episodes where I'm joined by my beautiful co-host Sharna, and we'll be both diving into the stories to make sure that we are all educated on the topics of climate change and environmentalism to make sure that we can be the best version of ourselves for the planet.
Great sum up.
Pretty good sum up, I think, of the episode. I'm really excited for what we have to dig in here. There's a lot of stuff that I actually felt really educated about when I was doing the research, and some stuff that is scary, but I'm also very excited for the good news stories because I think this month in particular, and last month as well, I found the same thing where there was so many good news stories that came across my, social sphere that I'm really excited about, and that if you told me 5 or 10 years ago that this would be happening, I almost wouldn't believe you.
Can't wait to hear your good news stories.
Yes.
But before we do, November saw us celebrating our vegan anniversaries.
Yes,
Both
how
of us.
Exciting. Yeah, I actually don't know what day I went vegan, so I chose the 1st of November because it's around that time, but I think you kind of know when.
Yeah, I think it was the 21st of November. We went to Union Kiosk to get some beautiful toasties, didn't we?
Yeah, I've really been vibing that place. So if you're ever in Melbourne, Union Kiosk, not sponsored or anything, but they have toasties and coffees, and they have got croissants, and they're fully plant-based.
We haven't even had one of their croissants because their toasties are so good.
You're not going to go there for a croissant. Their toasties are actually fantastic.
It's 100% vegan and it's zero waste, as you mentioned. Shout out to Union Kiosk. Amazing job. And their service was amazing too. They were really so nice. Lovely.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm 7 years now vegan. Yeah, I know.
You're not pale, pasty, spotty.
I'm still alive. I'm kicking. Fittest I've probably ever been, besides maybe a few months ago. And you have, ticked over 2 years now?
2 years, yes.
Wow, fantastic. We were talking about, that transition because we've been dating when you weren't vegan, and we talked about how that really looked like. And I know it's a really big talking point for a lot of people. Like, would a vegan date a non-vegan? And I was very adamant that I wouldn't. I
really thought we would never actually get together because I wasn't vegan.
Yeah, but here we are, 7 years and 2 years, all good in the hood.
And you asked me a question at breakfast.
What was the thing that made you curious and pull the trigger on veganism?
And it really got me thinking, and it was the fact that you didn't pressure me into veganism. You let me explore it at my own pace. It was, and you listened to things like Mike the Vegan loud, and I got to hear it. So I was more exposed to that. But I also said to you that I would do it one day, but I just can't make the decision for you. I needed to make it for myself. So if we ever, God forbid, did split up, I would still be living this lifestyle. It wouldn't be purely because we were together, because that to me is so phony.
Reason. Yeah, it is. You're right. Phony is a good way to put it.
Yeah. So if you do have that, don't be closed off to someone that's not vegan. And I was somebody that was eating literally meat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So my friends are just gobsmacked at the fact that I, of everyone they know, has gone vegan. So it can be done. As long as everyone's willing to see both sides of the story,
Yeah,
It can happen.
And obviously, for the people who relate to my position of, you like or you love someone who's not vegan, a big thing for me was just accepting that, not forcing, like you said, not forcing my ideology or beliefs, but educating out loud. But at one stage, and I think this is what it came down to, I just accepted the fact that you might not ever be. If you were majority plant-based, I would be personally happy just for the sake of health, because I, knowing the science, didn't want to be with someone who would die, well, statistically pass away potentially earlier than me by 20-30%. So it was that for me, but I would accept that fact that you might not ever associate yourself with that philosophy. So I think that's also an important point.
I think that was really important for me as well, that you accepted that. So then there was no pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you had have given me a deadline, or if you're not vegan by this date, we're over. That would have messed with people. Yeah. So, yeah.
It's very controlling, narcissistic. Yeah, you don't want that.
No. So hopefully that can help somebody in a situation that we were in.
100%. Let's get started into our headlines, shall we?
Take it away.
All right. So Australia is pretty much at 1.5 degree of warming. So this is huge. So for anyone who knows, the Paris Agreement is in place to limit that 1.5 degree warming. And for anyone who's seen Australia in the news, we are the weirdest country. We'll have insane amounts of flooding. And then that same year, we'll have an insane fire season, and we've got cyclones, and we've got all these things that are really dragging us down. And so a new report from the CSIRO found that Australia has warmed on average by 1.47 degrees, plus or minus 0.24 degrees Celsius. So, and this is since national records began in 1910. So the rate of CO2 accumulation in our atmosphere has increased every single decade since atmospheric measurements began. Now, this is super scary, given that how much we both love the country, and I'm sure we want people to visit the country, but if it's ravaged by these natural disasters, it's really going to do a number on our GDP. We're already seeing the cost of living rise here because of certain farms, of course, losing a lot of their produce, but also tourism is taking a big hit. So there's a graph I want to leave everyone, and I'll pop it up on the screen, I'll pop it up on the website, but the CSIRO has kind of did a full summary of why this has happened and what the future of Australia looks like. And this is quite a grim graph, and it comes with 8 points, and I just wanted to outline those 8 points today. So national, global, and temperature rise to continue. These are all their predictions. Sea level rise to continue. Marine heat waves to be more frequent and intense. Warmer with more heat waves and fewer cooler days. Now we've got fewer tropical cyclones, but a greater proportion of high-intensity storms with increased rainfall. The cool season rainfall decline in southern and eastern Australia to continue. Heavy rainfall to become intense, and longer fire seasons. So none of these are fantastic things to have. And one thing I didn't note down, but I did some research, is our sea temperature, so like the Great Barrier Reef and a lot of our ocean around the country, has risen by 1 degree, which is why we see the bleaching that we do.
That was exactly what I was about to say. You're mentioning all of these things, but all of these things have flow-on effects. So the sea temperature rising, yeah, that's really bad. But why is it bad? It's because the coral is then going to bleach. And then the coral will no longer be a habitat for these marine animals. And then there's just so much flow-on effect that you could go on for days about how terrible these effects are.
Yeah, it's when I saw the report, I was super alarmed because this came out, I believe, only last week, which is touching considering, Australia's commitments at COP27, which we might get into, but it's something we definitely want to pay close attention to.
SeaWorld dolphin attacked by pod. This was caught on video by just a bystander. And we can put the video in if you're watching it on YouTube. But it shows an injured dolphin resting on the side of the tank.
The dolphins probably will not be ready to meet you today, so I'm so sorry that happened.
And this was the caption that this person posted on social media. I think it was Twitter. A dolphin pod at SeaWorld Orlando today repeatedly attacked one of the dolphins in the pod while the trainers were trying to do the show, causing the dolphin to start bleeding. So this dolphin was bleeding. You could see the gash on the side of it, and there was another dolphin that just continued, even though this, dolphin was sitting on the side of the tank. And these people are just trying to do their performance around all of this happening. And of course, Peter responded to the video. Peter is calling on this hideous abusement park. I love that. Abusement park. Yeah, love it. Anyway, to end its exploitation of dolphins by sending them to seaside sanctuaries where they would never be used in shows and no one would get hurt. I'm paraphrasing on what Peter came out and for their statement. So SeaWorld has responded regarding the animal welfare concerns. This video shows common behaviour among dolphins exhibited by both wild populations and those in human care as a part of natural social interactions. Numerous scientific studies have been published about this type of behaviour among dolphins, demonstrating that it is normal and socially healthy.
This looks healthy to me.
Yeah. You just look at the video and you'll know that it just doesn't seem right. And
you can't claim it's natural if they're essentially caged up.
Yeah.
There's nothing natural about a zoo. The only natural part about it is the biology and the physiology of the animal.
Yeah.
That's it. Where they are, who they're with. Dolphins aren't naturally interacting with humans.
No, exactly. And yeah, there's just so much to uncover. And it's so sad that SeaWorld don't see what's wrong with this, especially SeaWorld Orlando have had heaps of issues with their orcas back years ago. I don't know if you've ever heard about it.
It shouldn't be SeaWorld. It should be Blind World because they can't see anything.
It's an abusement park.
It's an abusement. That is great. I'm going to use that. But it's hard, when we know people that like going to SeaWorld and it's actually really hard to bring this up because they want to, and I understand they want to educate their children. They want something where their children can do something different.
And that's exactly what this show was. It was an educational show about dolphins, but I think the education that we should be walking away with is that they should be in the wild and we shouldn't be able to touch them as we please.
The best thing I have ever come across with on that point is kids have never seen a dinosaur ever. Yet they love dinosaurs.
They love dinosaurs.
They have the toys, and you've got, what's that park in Dubai or something, that prince in Dubai that was had that ethical phase, and he built a zoo that's fully digital and the animals are holograms.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll try to find a link to that in the show notes, but it's actually really cool. But yeah, God, I really, really dislike with a passion SeaWorld. Well, I'm gonna airdrop you a video so we can watch this together here. So what you're watching here is, and I'll put it up on the screen, it's the Democratic Republic of Congo and one of their floods where there's just plastic all in and you can see people walking waist high there in water where there's just plastic bottles. People standing on high ground to avoid, I don't know how much plastic is there, but it's disgusting. And so this was posted by Greenpeace Africa, and I recommend everyone watching it just to see the exacerbated problem that they have there. Now, the context is that thousands of plastic bottles get thrown into the Ruzizi River, which routinely clog the hydropower station's turbines, which shuts down the city's power for months at a time.
What?
Can you, even fathom that?
But no one has thought, hey, let's stop using plastic, which is disrupting our electricity, and this cycle will not happen anymore.
Do they have access to clean water without the plastic bottles?
That is so frustrating.
Super frustrating. So this is where you need, we've seen stuff like this before where Jaden Smith was opening up that clean energy water purifier machine in like African nations, and he had one in, I think it was Flint, Michigan as well. So they just don't have the resources to dispose of this stuff. So when it gets flooded, they go without power because the hydropower, which is where they actually get a lot of their energy from, just can't work. So there's videos of like literally divers going down and unclogging this. It's really strange. But yeah, it's not uncommon at all. And there's actually a company that tries to salvage those bottles. It's a green initiative company and just turns them into cement and slabs to build the streets and stuff. Where it's actually it's cheaper for the locals to actually have plastic paths, plastic driveways from recycled plastic bottles. But this stuff like is just coming out, these green initiatives. So I'm going to butcher this name, but Levin Chizungu from the National Society of Electricity has come out and said, unfortunately, there are no dumps and people throw their waste in the gutters and it just comes up washed here at the dam. That's it. There's no, where are you going to put your rubbish?
So there's no infrastructure for removing your rubbish. There's no infrastructure for clean, safe drinking water.
It's weird. I don't know if using the word no is correct. Like there's absolutely zero. I would assume that there's some. I would very much also assume that it's not at the level of their population.
Yeah.
So it's built for like a small town, not a country kind of situation.
Yeah.
Again, there could be no. He's said in this quote, there are no dumps. So I can see that being possible, but I don't want to say it because I'm not super well versed on.
So where does their rubbish go?
You're looking at it.
And then
flood
what?
Zones.
Ocean.
I think it goes ocean, landfill, so fires, things like that. Really not good. So there's a lot of work that needs to get done in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's just one video that's surfaced up that's really, really alarming. But speaking of plastic, it's going to take me to my next headline. A new study finds microplastics in human breast milk. This is something I did a few hours of diving into to see what the actual results are based on this claim, because you know it's always good to read beyond the headline, even if it's something that you'd be like, yeah, that's believable. So at this stage, we can safely conclude that microplastics have successfully penetrated a vast majority of the human population. So this first-of-a-kind study was published on the NIH using Raman microspectrometry. I can't say that word. Microspectroscopy to look at human breast milk samples. Now, it was only 34 samples provided by 34 women, and 26 of those were contaminated with microplastics. So quite a large chunk, but again, only 34. So I'd love to see this on a larger scale. I don't know what the cost is to use this microspectro system. So I'm imagining that was a big limitation, but also being the first of its kind. It is important to note that the most abundant microplastics were polyethylene, polyvinyl chloride, and polypropylene. So these sizes are between 2 and 12 micrometers. So it's not that small. And I'll on the website, and I'll pop it up on the video here, the actual images. So I did show you this one. It's like a green blob you're seeing under the microscope, or a triangle, yellow, blue, all these different colors, and they just look super toxic. Like this is gas, petroleum in your breast milk that you're giving your child. It's actually really, really worrying. So yeah.
But then you look at the alternative and formula, it's probably not much better.
No, it's not. This is super worrying for the next generation and all their problems that could be exacerbated by this plastic crisis.
Which really frustrates me because we're going to a festival tomorrow, and we were getting ready to pack our stainless steel water bottle, but they're not allowing us to bring in empty bottles of our own. We have to then purchase a pouch, what they've called a refillable water pouch, which we can only assume is made out of plastic. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a fairly warm day tomorrow, so the sun's going to be beating down on that plastic, which will just be seeping straight into our water. So that really frustrates me that, it's frustrating.
Yeah, and I did want to actually follow this up with a separate story that is about compostable plastic. So
Do tell.
the big compost experiment that just didn't break down well. That's the headline. I thought very, very much about that headline. So a new study that was published on Frontier followed 9,701 UK citizens and looked into how home compostable plastics can be a part of the solution for everyday people. So the categories they looked at was capability, opportunity, and motivation. Of this cohort, only 1,648 citizens performed the home compost experiments to test the environmental performance of compostable plastics, which already speaks volumes about the accessibility part and, of course, the educational piece as well around this technology. So the results themselves showed that the public are confused about the meaning of the labels of compostable and biodegradable plastics. 14% of sampled plastic packaging items tested were certified industrial compostable only, and 46% had no compostable certification. Of the biodegradable and compostable plastics tested under different home composting conditions, the majority did not even fully disintegrate. Only 60% of those that were certified home compostable, including those, so most of which was home compostable, didn't even disintegrate in their home, of those that had a composting system. So the authors therefore concluded that for those reasons, home composting is not an effective or environmentally beneficial waste processing method for biodegradable or compostable packaging in the UK.
It's very sad to hear.
I mean, we've always kind of held that stance.
Yes.
That it's, you can talk about compostable, but it's just not the solution that you think it is.
It needs to be on a greater scale. You need to have do they have special lights that help compost? I don't know. It's just it seems to work well on an industrial scale.
It's the industrial level, like taking it to some sort of complex, or maybe, like we have, you got the green bins, you got the glass bin, you got the paper and cardboard, maybe there's a compostable bin, or that's technically the green bin, I suppose.
I actually don't know.
But do all councils have that? And what are the limitations? What manual do you have to read? Why does it have to be so complicated? And, this was brought up on an episode that's coming out next month, and Tony, his business, who I interviewed, he sends out compostable mailer bags and they have instructions, but it's like, yes, we pay this extra bit of money to make sure it's compostable bags. But he's like, if I were to survey everyone, I don't think many of them at all would actually compost them.
Yeah.
He's like, we pay the extra because that's the only thing we can do as a business.
Yeah.
But it's up to the consumer. And if the consumer's confused, even after we send them instructions, there's nothing more a business can do. And that's where you have to think, like, there has to be either a better technology, like one that literally disintegrates with the sun or something, or it's, there's no real, just reducing down your consumerism is the only way to really tackle this.
And it just sounds like it could stem from education at an early age.
100%. I've got one last story before we get into the main one. I've just got heaps. I've really just been loving looking at all the news that's happened this month. So Labor and Liberal have just voted for a new gas project in Victoria. So that was a headline that I read anyway. And this deal was actually, the headline I found was a little bit misleading because in reality, the deal with GB Energy was actually decided back in March under the Liberal government with Scott Morrison. And the only other person, or the main person that helped out with this deal as well, was Angus Taylor, who I think I've roasted once or twice on the show. He's the person who decided to go to COP27 trying to say Australia is renewable because we want clean gas and we want to drill more. That was his fossil fuel corrupted speech there. Yeah, so $32 million of our taxpayer money is currently going to this project in Gippsland on Golden Beach. So you mentioned last month the Energy Agency, International Energy Agency, and they said no new coal and gas should be started. So we know Australia, any new coal is straight out of the question. It shouldn't be happening. And fortunately, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has said that his government will make an announcement before Christmas, whether he thinks that they should go ahead with this or not, pending trying to get a price cap on the gas that Australians are currently having, which, you know, I'll pay a few extra dollars on a full tank in the car to avoid a whole new gas project getting drilled on a beautiful coastline.
Yeah, I feel very sad for those people that live in Gippsland area and just love the nature that they're amongst.
Yeah.
Very sad to hear.
Yeah, well, it's meant to provide, or at least in their plan that they proposed to the government, it was meant to provide 1,700 jobs. But, you know, Gippsland does have a tourism sector. What does that do to the ocean there? Like, you might have 1,700 jobs that will last, I think the plan was 6 years. Then what? It's short-term gain for long-term destruction. Now on to our deep dive. What has happened at this year's COP27? So like I mentioned at the beginning, there were big things that came out of this month's COP27. And for those that don't know, again, it is the conference of the parties when it comes to climate change. And it is all these COPs are just on the mission to reduce and curb our emissions on a global scale and, of course, help those mostly affected. So what we wanted to do was discuss what actually came out of the 2-week event.
Do we start with the good or the bad?
I don't know. I think let's start with the bad.
Okay.
So I've only got 5 points, and some of them relate to each other. So there's probably a lot other ones that I haven't gotten into, but these are the ones that I think we should mostly know about. So the first bad point I found is several oil exporting nations, including Saudi Arabia, shot down coals to phase out fossil fuels, surprise, surprise, and peak global emissions by 2025. So it's easy to believe this because, and this was actually something that shocked me the most, but it's also very believable, 636 oil and gas lobbyists registered to attend the event. 636. That is huge. That's a 25% increase from the previous conference. That's like having a smoking section that sponsors health events. That it's just ridiculous. Like, that is way too many. That's 636 too many people. So I'm really upset about that. That is, how are you going to get progress if literally the people you're going against are there trying to sway governments to say, oh no, fossil fuel is not really the problem. Like, it could be, probably isn't. Like, that is just so not cool. And so instead of committing to the obvious solution to reduce emissions, those parties, the oil and gas nations, insisted on using the wording, in quotes, accelerating efforts towards the phase down of unabated coal power and phase out of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. The problem with that wording is, as Chloe Ferrand puts it so well, is that unabated coal power insinuates that coal with carbon capture technology could be continued. So they're not making a line in the sand or anything. And specifying inefficient fossil fuel subsidies may allow for loopholes due to the definition of inefficient. What does that really mean, inefficient?
Yeah, who's deciding that? Who's policing that?
No one.
No one.
No one is. So that's the first bad point I have. Now, number 2, carbon credits were getting talked about, again, like a holy solution, a silver bullet, and the Australian government loves to do this. And I'm sure a lot of governments do as well. So this carbon market scheme would allow countries or entities that can reduce or absorb emissions to sell them as carbon credits to higher emitters. So it sounds great, but this is again where language is very important. They were trying to give the buyer and sellers confidentiality around this, which can remove any level of transparency. And there's actually a huge draft that the UNFCCC wrote up, which I only skimmed past, but it allowed for double claiming under the Paris Agreement. And what this means is that a company can buy a credit for the emission reduction that's also been counted by a country towards its climate goals. So say like Woodside Energy decides to buy carbon credit offsets, the Australian government is like, oh great, this is helping us as a nation as well. And so they're buying one offset, but it's counting both as a company and it counts twice. So this was actually really, really bad. So the wording here in particular, a lot of people were unhappy with. which is why I think the carbon credit scheme overall, as it sits right now, is not a solution. It's very far from it. Third thing, Coca-Cola, the world's largest non-alcoholic beverage company, was the sponsor. The multinational had increased its plastic use by 3.5% since 2019. Huge sponsor. Now let's continue on the sponsoring goal for number 4. 18 of the 20 companies that sponsored the UN climate talks in the Egyptian resort of Sharm el-Sheikh either directly support or partner with oil and gas companies. So, more straw man stuff. And of course, let's go. Number 5 is also relating to sponsoring, because I think that's hugely not transparent and not ethical. The COP27 partner, Hassan Alam Holding, is one of the largest privately owned corporations in Egypt and announced to invest $17.1 billion to turn North Africa into a regional gas hub and $830 million in oil projects over the next 2 years. So almost all the sponsors were completely against what we're trying to stop here.
Are they getting involved because they want to make change? Or do we think they're just in there to corrupt?
100% not. Yeah, 100% corrupt, or at least slow down.
Yeah.
While companies are slowly making the transition, like we have AGL in Australia, a huge company, slowly transitioning to using renewable energy and stopping a lot of their oil projects, which we've talked about and you've brought up a few times on the show as well, since Mike Cannon-Brookes has bought, I believe, 44% of the company. And then they're slowly trying to shift away from all of their oil fields. So in that time, of course, they're going to pump out as much as possible. This is my theory anyway. I don't have any proof, but I'm sure the theory is not too off what's going on. But there is a limit to every gas field that there is. And then, of course, we know that we're slowly moving towards a full phase out, at least for that Middle Eastern part's going to be probably the slowest.
Yeah, well,
Saudi Arabia, Qatar.
There.
Oh, yeah. Well, Qatar actually sits on the largest natural gas field in the world.
Wow.
So their 300,000 residents, I watched the doco on it the other day, their 300,000 residents actually get paid just to be a resident.
Wow.
Healthcare, education, they get guaranteed jobs. And just because they are the richest, one of the richest nations in the world, because of the oil that they're pumping out, they have thousands of slaves that work over there. It's actually really horrific, but they are going to be one of the last to phase it down. So yeah, the sponsors, not cool. And that's really the negatives of COP. And knowing that, we can see why progress tends to be a little bit slower.
Yeah, I was just thinking about all of the people that are there that don't have the right intention. I feel like they're there to put a little bit of doubt in your mind, because
just a little seedling of negativity.
That tiny little bit that could just stop you from believing and stop you from making that action that they don't want you to do anyway. So yeah, that's really interesting.
Well, I think it's time for your good news then.
Now for the good.
Please.
We've got 5 as well.
Oh, fantastic.
So 1, a fund to support vulnerable developing countries was set up. 30 years in the making, and apparently one of the most discussed topics at COP27 was how these countries were going to be supported for the loss and damages due to climate change, including but not limited to storms and floods. Despite this win for poorer nations, details as to who would pay, how much, and who would benefit will be decided at next year's COP.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. So you finally feel like, yes, we've gotten somewhere, and it's like, damn it, it's just not enough. It's not enough just yet. So apparently that will be decided at next year's COP28 in November 2023.
Well, look, it might take a year to budget it out, figure out. We've only got 2 weeks of the COP, and the point is to actually really bring plans into actions, and then you've got the year to rustle out the wordings, different things like that. So I'm really then looking forward to that coming to action 1 year from now, although a lot can happen in terms of natural disasters in 1 year.
Absolutely. That's the other problem, isn't it? Number 2, progress on the methane pledge. The methane pledge was established in last year's COP26 to cut emissions of the incredibly powerful greenhouse gas by 30% by the end of the decade. Sadly, the top 2 methane emitters, China and India, as well as Russia, have not pledged to this agreement. Very sad. US climate envoy John Kerry described the progress as an absolutely critical to our ability to keep 1.5 degrees in reach. So for those that don't know, and I'm sure you've heard of methane before, but methane is a gas and it is 84 times more potent in trapping heat over a 2-decade period, with a global warming potential 25 times higher than that of carbon dioxide. It is a major contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions. Methane emissions have skyrocketed in recent years and are currently 162% higher than pre-industrial levels.
That's a lot.
Huge. So they're saying food waste in landfill accounts for 1/5 of all methane emissions.
Yep.
So there are going to be assessments on landfills and dump sites on vulnerable and rural communities, Africa, South America, and Asia, to protect food security, which also might help with developing nations like Dominican Republic of Congo. Maybe there'll be some progress there. Number 3, net zero targets raised. Some COP27 countries announced more ambitious climate targets.
Oh, fantastic. Do you know who those are?
Mexico is one of them.
Ooh.
They announced a new target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 35% by 2030 from a 2000 baseline.
I'm so surprised because Mexico is actually a horrific emitter when it comes to oil. The Gulf of Mexico is just pledged with crap. And that explosion that we saw last year with the eye of that turned that's maybe they're running out of oil. So they're like, oh, may as well.
It must be a 5% decrease on their previous goal.
Okay, very cool.
So that's 5%. We'll take whatever we can get. But that's on a baseline of 2000.
Okay.
So so they're not reducing it 35% by now. So by 2000.
Yep.
The European Union pledged to reduce greenhouse gases by 57% on their 1990 levels.
Wow, that's great.
By 2030.
Wow.
That was the most impressive. The other one, which is a bit of a good and a bad, Turkey presented a new climate plan that includes a pledge to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 41% in 2030 compared to its business as usual scenario.
Oh, well, that's,
Which unfortunately means their carbon footprint will still increase by 32%.
Yeah, Turkey's never been really fantastic at climate pledges, which is really sad.
We can't talk. Australia's terrible
No,
as well.
we can't. I'm not saying Australia's any better. I'm just saying Turkey is not good.
Yeah. The plan does not commit to halting new coal projects or phasing out existing power plants, unfortunately. And then we've got 2 new Just Energy Transition Partnership funding deals that were announced. And that would help shift Vietnam and Indonesia away from coal and coal power, and speed up the renewable energy transitions in both countries.
Fantastic. I actually read a report by McKinsey that laid out a plan that Vietnam can actually go renewable. They have the resources to.
Incredible.
So good on them.
We didn't see much there, did we?
No.
We saw a couple of wind turbines.
Yeah.
But really not much.
Yeah. But they're, I'd love to see what portion of their population is in the cities compared to the towns.
Oh,
because the carbon
huge.
footprint of those people in the towns is actually I'd imagine so small.
It would be small.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Number 4, deforestation was a hot topic. This is one of my favourites.
I like that pun. Was that a purposeful pun?
No, it wasn't actually.
Okay, very good.
I'm so good.
Yeah, so good.
26 countries came together and launched the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership, the FCLP. They will unite to halt and reverse deforestation and land degradation by 2030.
Fantastic. 2030 is actually not that far away. Yeah, that's really... Is this global?
Yeah.
That's really good. Because there's a lot, especially when we look at soy and beef grazing. Palm oil is quite a large contributor, especially orangutan habitats, although I'm not sure that there's much left of these.
Honestly, have no idea.
And this also means
Really
the African forests, which are hugely popular. Yeah, this is
So
overall, this is great.
26 countries that are working on this. So hopefully we're going to get more and more countries part of it.
I hope Brazil and Argentina are on that list.
I actually don't know who's on that list, but hold the fort. More on this topic.
I will.
Countries including the UK, the US, Norway and Korea committed to the largest ever public-private effort to protect tropical rainforests.
Very good.
So that's excellent news. And then we've got Brazilian president-elect.
Lula.
What?
Lula.
Sure, that's one of his names.
Yeah, he's got like 5.
Yes. So Luiz Lula.
We're calling him Lula.
Lula made a speech at COP27. He said climate change would have the highest profile in his government. And I quote, "There is no climate security for the world without a protected Amazon." Yes.
Yep.
We will do whatever it takes to have zero deforestation and the degradation of our biomes.
Fantastic news. You also stole one of my good news
Oh,
segments.
I'm so sorry.
Lula is now president of Brazil, which is exciting news.
Sorry, yes. And he came out with this speech literally days after he'd been elected.
Because people, he was yelling out like, Brazil is back, and everyone's like chanting.
Oh my
There's
gosh.
videos at COP27, people like, Brazil, Lula. It was really cool.
So we're going with Lula.
Yeah.
Love it. So we know the previous president, he actually got the Amazon to a 15-year high of deforestation.
Yeah, so we don't like Jair Bolsonaro, which is the previous president, and he is incredibly corrupt. We don't want to do any of that. So gold mining, heaps of logging, agricultural expansion, these are things that Bolsonaro was infamous for.
15-year all-time high. Scientists are warning that the forest was nearing a tipping point beyond where there could be irreversible consequences that would be felt across the globe. So it's really, really positive to see this new president putting his foot down.
100%. This is great news.
Number 5.
Hit us up.
Food was a focus. Look, I think it was a very small focus, but it was one of the focuses nonetheless, and it is an improvement on last year's COP.
Which there was none.
Correct.
Oh, I think there was like a 1-hour talk actually.
Oh, that's right. There was 1 hour. That's correct.
Something
Yes.
like that. Something ridiculous.
So, and there was a lot of controversy sparked around that because food is such a huge part of climate change. Animal agriculture, which is catastrophic for the planet. So, yeah, I think a lot of people will be a lot happier with this. Animal agriculture contributes to at least 14.5% of greenhouse gas emissions and is a leading cause of deforestation and biodiversity loss. Despite this, world leaders and the general public are often neglecting to include this in the environmental discussions. So, cell-based meat was served at this year's COP.
Really? I didn't see that.
It was being served in the Singapore pavilion only, as Singapore
loves that stuff.
Well, Singapore's the only country at the moment that have cell-based meat, which also is called cultivated meat. So they're the only ones, and it was an invite only, so you couldn't just go there and try it, unfortunately. It is expensive at this stage, so it will get better. It was the company called Eat Just. They create the product. They served a range of chicken dishes. Nice. So as I mentioned, it was invite only and it was only sampling. So it's not on their main menu or anything like that. So it is just sampling. And this came out after we found out about the regular menus at COP and how it was just so heavily lent on meat and dairy. So that's a little bit sad. actually it was more heavily on beef and imported salmon, which was predominantly on the menu.
That's so crazy.
It is, isn't it? Like imported as well. Like, yeah. But also on the topic, there was a
They
vegan...
couldn't serve, they couldn't serve Egyptian like food. Like they are mostly, like when we went there, so many plant-based, they're okra dishes.
Correct.
This just blows
Falafels
my mind.
are
Like get some
humongous
culture.
there. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll rant after we complete. Yeah.
And lastly, on the food topic, there was a vegan educator booth called Food for Climate.
Nice.
And that's the first time...
I've seen their stuff. Yeah.
It's the first time that any kind of pavilion like this was at a COP. So...
Fantastic.
And the head of the UN policy at ProVeg described this as great progress.
Yes, we love ProVeg.
Yeah. So good stuff came out of COP, I think.
Very good stuff. And
Still a lot more to come.
yeah.
A lot more.
Next year, do you think overall after learning about it, do you think it's gone better than last year, same as last year, or worse than last year?
I think better. Last year just felt, I don't know, felt like nothing really.
I think this went a little bit better as well. I think I'm going to touch on a few other things specific to it being in Egypt that I think could have been very much improved on.
Yeah.
But I think overall it's about the minimum I would expect over a 2-week conference in which there was a lot of political things that happened. Biden secured his midterm during that event. Bolsonaro is booted out of Brazil. And so there was a lot of other things happening around the world that were very, very important at the same time, which I think takes away from the COP a little bit.
Definitely.
But I think there was some great progress made. But I want to zoom into your first point about this wealth inequality fund, or this I think it was $100 billion at least that's going to the poorer nations. I forgot the exact figure, but it was a big focus on this year's COP, and we knew it was before it even started because a lot of nations were talking about it. Last year, no progress was made for it last year. Last year was when they had that video come out of Tuvalu's president waist deep in the water, and that's when that conversation, I think, really kicked off. And then you had that famine and cyclone in Madagascar, and a lot of other African countries really struggle.
Yeah.
And so on November 10th, published in a very timely manner, a paper went live on Nature exploring the great inequality, as they like to call it. So they found that absolute income inequality, which refers to the monetary differences rather than proportional differences between income groups, is still rising. Wealth inequality is even greater than income inequality. So strikingly, the world's 2,153 billionaires earn more wealth than the bottom 60% of the world. So this inequality affects us all. The global north, for example, the richest 10% in OECD countries, so this is like Australia, US, New Zealand, Finland, UK, so think developed nations. It's a long list. They own as much, the richest 10% own as much as the poorest 52%. So there's just a big seesaw happening, and the global south fares no better. For example, the top 10% in India owns 60% of all the wealth in India, while the bottom 40% own less than 4%. So there's just not much wiggle room happening, and wealth gaps are widening. So the share of total global wealth going to the top 1.1% rose from 35% in 2000 to 46% in 2020. COVID-19, they actually wrote down, exacerbated this. So the richer got richer in that period, the poorer got poorer.
Of course.
So really important why we focus on these richer countries giving more money to the poorer nations. So looking at the environmental impact from rich to poor, the carbon emissions emitted by the top 10% of income earners is estimated at 34% of the global total in 2015, whereas the bottom 50% accounted for only 15%. So the top 10% had more carbon emissions, double, than the bottom 50%. It's not right. It's not fair. And the super rich, which is the technical term they use, and they define that as net assets above US $1 million, emits, which is 0.5% of the world's population, emits 13.6% of lifestyle-related emissions. So we've got 0.5% of the world's population emitting 13.6%. And so this is why we really want to focus on that donation, because it is really unfair, unjust. And I'll post some graphs on how this actually works. But I want to get back into the COP27, and it's probably the last note I have on the event, and that's just in regards to security at the event. And of course, for anyone who knows COPs, protests are a really big thing, and we want to encourage them because it's free speech. It's people speaking out for what they find important, what they value. And so we want to promote this. And Egypt, for anyone who's been, isn't the kind of place where protests have a really good track record, given their previous revolution and a lot of their dictatorship-like style of government before that. I'm sure that you can imagine protests would have been quite difficult. Right now, there are 75,000 prisoners in jail due to political reasons in Egypt. So this is an important fact when you consider how prevalent protests are when COPs are on. So ahead of the conference, the governor of South Sinai told a domestic cable channel that the Egyptian authorities were under pressure from Western governments to provide space for protesters. So that's great. This is good news.
Yep.
They understand the benefit to having protests and having voices heard. So their answer was to build a heavily surveyed pen in the desert, far from the conference center, lined with cafes and palm trees, but where no one could hear their chants. So the rules governing the climate protest designated area, end quote, so that's climate protest designated area, were clear. Anyone wishing to enter had 36 hours notice to use it. Full details of the protest, they needed the organizers' details and their badges. And entering the area meant agreeing to be heavily surveyed. So all of this just rings alarm bells. This is not a democratic response to protests.
Which makes me question, why are we having these kind of conferences where we know it attracts protests and things? Why are we having them in places that don't allow them?
Weird. It's kind of, I don't know if it's like the FIFA situation where Qatar paid $220 billion to have it there, because you've got about 1.3 billion people watch FIFA. So it's a lot of eyes on one nation. I don't know if that's what it is, or it has been a while that there has been a COP in Africa.
Yeah.
So maybe they're just trying to ferret up a little bit. And because, it is fitting because Africa is one of those nations and continents that actually needs a lot of the climate financing and support.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of reasons for that to happen. I did expect them to become lenient on this topic. Obviously not, which is a huge shame. Hussein Baumi from Amnesty International said that, in quotes, this could be the most highly surveyed COP in the history of the conference. This surveillance has also extended to the digital world via the conference's official app, which multiple security experts said could read attendees' emails, access their phone's camera and microphone, and risk turning into a surveillance tool for the Egyptian state, aiding in its dragnet surveillance and the targeting of civil society. So this is insane. So meanwhile, members of the civil society have reported intense surveillance during the negotiations themselves. So they just had eyes and ears everywhere.
Do you think that would put people off from coming, attending?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. It also puts people off from being honest and being genuine, because you're always watching behind your back.
Yeah.
And to add this even worse, they were actually being photographed by Egyptian security during the meetings.
Goodness me.
Yeah. So next year, to round us off with the final point, it is in Dubai. So one of the biggest oil production countries in the world. So I wonder how that's going to go down.
Couldn't even guess, honestly. We've been to Dubai as well. We went during Ramadan, so it was very strict. Couldn't have water, couldn't have food during the day. So I'm really hoping Ramadan isn't in November next year for all of those people's sake. It'll be a very interesting watch.
Yeah,
And Dubai do things on a huge
It's going to be pretty
scale.
grand, yeah.
It'll be massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. One to watch out for.
One to definitely watch out for. Australia is actually bidding to have it here as well. Anthony Albanese wants to host it 2028. I
Great.
think it was 2029. So
excellent.
that's one we can go to.
Yeah. Has it been organised
no.
So why so far away?
I'm not sure how often, this is a good question. I actually don't know the answer to. I don't know how often they book it. Like I know, again, with the World Cup, it's 12 years in advance. Like that's a long time. With the COPs, I don't think it is. I think it's like 2 or 3. And that's only
So
from
why 2028?
I don't know. I think maybe the next 2 years have been organised and they go on like 3 years.
Yeah,
loops. So yeah, I'm hoping that, given the change of government, we have a chance here and we have some genuinely good promises and we have the infrastructure to host a COP and we allow protests.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it'll be mayhem. I love that.
Do you want to leave us with your sustainability tip?
Oh, okay. So we're almost in December. Mm-hmm. And we know what that means.
Michael Bublé.
Mariah Carey.
Yeah.
Christmas is coming. So with Christmas, it's time to think about gifts and hopefully gifts that won't hurt the planet. Maybe even better the planet.
Wow.
I know, incredible. So giving things like, for example, seeds for their garden to grow some plants if they've got a garden, reusable items for the kitchen so they can ditch the single-use stuff, and even wrapping them in reusable gift wrapping.
Old newspapers?
Well, actually, you can purchase from Flora and Fauna actual gift wrapping that is reusable.
Very cool.
And I mentioned to you recently, I saw someone using, they get their toilet paper from Who Gives a Crap, and Who Gives a Crap, they individually wrap all of the toilet paper, and they're quite nice looking wrapping. So people have been using that for their wrapping paper, which I thought was really cool. Like, it's just thinking outside of the box, being creative. And speaking of being creative, I found a really cool eco art company. They are called, actually, I didn't even write it down.
arts_and_crafts or something like that.
Their company's not called that. That's their Instagram.
Oh, I guess.
But yeah, eco art and craft. And they sell, a shout out to Erin. She posted that on Instagram. So they have eco paints, crayons, and even Play-Doh. And like, I think the Play-Doh and even like slime, they're all toxic free and plastic free because we know they just end up in the kids' mouths anyway. So it's a perfect little gift for Christmas. Thinking outside the box, like for our nephews, we're taking them to Edgar's Mission and we're taking them, so we're going to be donating to Edgar's Mission. They can go and see the animals and it's a real educational thing. So they've only ever really been to zoos.
And Edgar's Mission, for those who don't know, is a sanctuary, animal sanctuary here.
Yes. So, so thinking outside the box and not just giving into consumerism.
Experiences over items.
That is our sustainability tip.
Fantastic. So I think it's actually time for the good news then, which is always a fun time. So you've stole one of mine, which is Brazil is back with a win. So there's that one. I've actually got, I'm happy to report that I have some pretty good news. The controversial Energy Charter Treaty, which protects fossil fuel investors, is losing nations. So France left this treaty early this month, and a few days later, Germany withdrew as well. So the pact was originally designed in 1994 to protect Western energy firms working in former Soviet countries, and it allows international investors in energy projects to sue governments for profit loss as a result of policy changes. So it's now viewed as a major threat to national climate plans to shut down coal plants or limit production of oil and gas. So now on the list, we have France, Spain, the Netherlands, Slovenia, Poland, and Germany who have withdrawn from the pact. So obviously, they want to make climate pledges and they have certain goals that they want to hit, like net zero. They can't do that if they ban fossil fuels and can get sued for 100 million, which I think Italy has been threatened to be sued for like $100 million for one of their... I think I only briefly read or something like that, but what a very sneaky treaty to have for fossil fuel companies. So yes, nations withdrawing is a huge win.
Domino's has launched an Impossible pizza range.
Incredible.
I'm pretty excited by it, actually.
Yeah.
They have added 8 pizzas.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is a lot. I did a Google search and the first thing that they were advertising was the Impossible range.
Wow.
So they're really pushing it.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure if they're all like Australia-wide, but they're definitely in Melbourne. I did check that. I'm hoping
You went to order.
Yeah, I did. I'm hoping they're in Yarrawonga as well. Maybe we can get one next week just to have a bit of a test. I know you love pizza as much as I do.
No, I don't. For the sarcasm, the
I
rolling of
just
the
love
eyes at
pizza
people.
so much.
I don't like Domino's. I'll say it on the record. I don't like it. It's just so oily and crap. And I feel
like it.
no. Okay, you can have your Domino's.
Yay! So they're trying to appeal to the flexitarian. So they're not necessarily reaching out to the vegan or the vegetarian
Which
here.
is smart because 60% of Australians surveyed identified as flexitarian.
That's right. So please keep in mind that the default cheese on this range is dairy. So you will need to you'll need to go in and substitute it.
Which means you have to pay extra.
Correct. Which really griped me when I was on their website. So you add the vegan cheese and it's $2.99.
Wow.
Yeah, but you take away the dairy cheese and you get no discount.
What?
So what really frustrates me is that you're minusing the dairy cheese, but if you wanted to add extra dairy cheese, it would be an extra $2. So why are you
make it
not
99 cents?
Why are you not discounting the $2 off like when we're removing the dairy cheese? It's just, it really gets me. It really, really irritates me.
Gets you enough to not get Domino's?
Probably not. I just want to try it, okay? I haven't tried the McPlant. I haven't tried the Hungry Jack's burger. I just want to try it.
Okay. Okay, what can I say?
But the same thing happened when I went out for dinner with my girlfriends recently. Like me and my friend both got an Avo toast. Hers came with eggs. I asked for the vegan option, which takes off the eggs. And I'm like, oh, well, what difference do I get? And she's like, oh, you'll get extra kale. You'll get extra this. I really didn't.
Give me a hash brown.
I should have said that. I should have said, can I substitute the eggs for a hash brown? Because that's really garbage. I'm paying the exact same amount. And she got 2 poached eggs. I didn't get any.
On this episode of How Vegans Get Shafted.
Seriously. And actually, I went out for dinner last night and they got we got the same pasta. I got mine without cheese and we got the same price. It just really gets me. I don't know. Am I just being...
I think that's pretty reasonable. You're doing this for the planet. It's not for selfish reasons.
I know.
And you deserve to get a cheaper price
I
if you're
think
using
so.
less ingredients and
Definitely.
less effort from the chef to not have to cook an extra ingredient.
Yeah.
For them, it doesn't take much time to read, oh, no egg, on the receipt or whatever.
That's right.
Like, yeah, I fully agree with you. And do you guys agree with that? For anyone listening, if you've made it to the good news part at the end, are we just being sooky or is this a reasonable thing to not like? I don't want to pay extra for I want a discount if I'm not getting an egg, or you give me a hash brown, or you give me extra avo,
Substitute
or you
it
give
for
me.
me.
Yeah,
Yep.
substitute it.
Back to Domino's though. Sorry, we got off topic. Some pieces in their new range, the Impossible hamburger and the Impossible cheeseburgers are not actually suitable for vegetarians either.
What?
So the cheese that they're using is like that American burger cheese and it's not vegetarian. So I don't know what they're using in it, but it's,
You're
just
making me really not like Domino's.
stop.
Crust pizza all the way.
The reason for this change is the fact that vegan food in supermarkets has gone up by 50%, the purchasing, not the price. Most of that growth is attributed to meat reducers instead of vegans, apparently. How they can figure that out, I do not know, but apparently. I'd love to see the data, really. And then Plant-Based News had reported that according to research conducted by Woolworths, 62% of its customers purchase animal-free products sometimes. So it must have something to do with the link on there, like everyday rewards cards or something. I don't know. But saying that, you're purchasing for a whole household generally.
Yeah, it could be a veggie in the family.
Yeah,
something
that's
like that.
right. So you'll look at ours. Ours would definitely never, but your mum's would mostly have plant-based and sometimes meat.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how they're trying to base that, but you can eat this pizza knowing it's emitting 88% fewer greenhouse emissions. Come on, that's impressive.
Yeah.
And then imagine changing the cheese to vegan cheese. It would be even more.
It would be very more impressive.
Yes.
And much more environmental. And I want people to... Now, I'm going to put it up on social media. I want people to comment below on this video. Do you prefer Domino's or crust pizza?
Oh my God. They're completely different. The demographic is so different.
But the price is the same.
No, it's not.
What's a Domino's large pizza?
I don't know. I can't remember.
If we're talking $2, it's $2. I'm crust. I'll pay the $2 if it's $2 because I'm not paying extra for this
Crust can
vegan
be
cheese.
really expensive.
Yeah, but still, it's so much better.
Domino's is also working with a global media agency, Wavemaker, to reduce the carbon footprint of its campaign for the Impossible.
For the campaign.
Yeah.
Interesting. I wonder what they're doing to reduce their digital footprint, I'm assuming.
Couldn't tell you.
Okay, interesting.
But that's just for the Impossible Pizza range. So
Okay.
that's appealing to a
That's appealing to the
vegan
environmentally
market.
sustainable.
yes.
Yeah. People who are vegos for the environment or
That's
vegans for
right.
the environment. Yep. And are willing to pay the $2.99. Back to Europe with my good news stories. France is going to install solar panels on large outdoor car parks.
That's really
Great
smart.
news. Super smart. So according to the government, the potential of the measure could reach up to 11 gigawatts or the equivalent of the power of 10 nuclear reactors. Could you imagine? You already got the space there, but then let's just add 10 nuclear reactors worth of power on the top of where your car goes under. How is that not done so much? Oh, I guess the technology has evolved, but the argument...
But why not, really?
Why not? Exactly. So initially the bill applied to car parks larger than 2,500 square meters. And there was a huge debate in Parliament about this, especially the wording. The senators preferred to define a threshold in number of places rather than in the area. So therefore, car parks with more than 80 spaces will be considered large. The provision will come into force on the 1st of July 2023. So not that long ago, in about 8 months, depending on the size of the car parks. Car parks with more than 400 spaces must be brought into compliance within 3 years from this date. 5 years if the number is between 800 and 400 car parks. Obviously, it takes time to install all that. And I don't know how they're working out the subsidies. Like if they're making this a rule, they have to be helping out some way or selling the energy to the government. There must be some sort of relationship there. But
They could be renting the space.
They could be renting the space. This is one of the... Honestly, if this pulls through, I'm super stoked for France.
I'm just trying to think of Melbourne. Most of our car parks, I feel, are underground.
They are.
So
it's on top of the buildings, but you don't... For a whole building, there's actually not that much space.
No, because they're quite narrow.
But we're talking France, the country of France. So think of like country town Australia, where you've got those like Coles or Woolworths or Kmart's that have those large outdoor car parks. I think that's where they're looking
I can
at.
think of like High Point or something like on their roof. That would be plenty of space, that kind of thing.
But even think of like, you've been to Paris. There's not that large, from what I've seen in photos and videos, car park areas. So I'm thinking they're going rural as well.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like all of France.
Maybe if you're French, you can correct me. But yeah, it definitely sounds like a more rural thing, which is exciting because that can firstly help offset these rural communities. Like that's the opportunity.
Yeah, that's
like in the middle of Australia, Cooper Pedy powered on what? 80% renewables or something like that because they've got a few wind farms out that way. Like the opportunity is in that rural area with this. But yeah, really exciting.
The last dog slaughterhouse in South Korea has shut down due to activism.
This is fantastic news.
How wonderful is that? So, major victory for animal rights charity, the Humane Society International / Korea.
Yep.
Which have been active in South Korea since 2015, working with dog meat farmers to close farms, rescue dogs, and drive change.
Wow.
Dog meat consumption has declined rapidly in South Korea, particularly among the younger generations. A survey was done in June 2018, found that 70% of South Koreans said they would not eat dog meat in the future.
This is great news.
Of course, whatever's happening underground is a whole different story, but this was a open dog slaughterhouse and it's now closed. So yes, very happy with that.
Very good news. I'm going to piggyback on your news in COP about the cell meat. Lab-grown meat has been declared safe for consumption. This is incredible news. So
I did see this.
Yeah, the FDA completed its first pre-market consultation for a human food made from cultured animal cells. On the FDA website, they actually have the FDA's response to Upside, which was the company making the cell-based chicken, FDA's scientific memo, and Upside's own assessment. So they have these 3 documents on there, which I kind of nerded out a little bit. It was really cool to see how the FDA works when it comes to this process of approving a type of food or technology that is so new and innovative and maybe not done before. So the reports are humongous and it was multi-page, and I'll leave it linked in the bio for anyone who wants, in the show notes, for anyone who wants to give it a read. But they had a lot of categories that they needed ticked off. And when I was reading this, they're super strict on what it takes to pass a new food technology. And it really made me wonder, like, if I'm going to the grocery store, supermarket, there is a lot of crap on the shelves. Processed foods that we know are contributing to the obesity epidemic and the degradation of human lives. How is this stuff approved if cell meat has to jump through like 5,000 hoops to get approved? Like this.
I wonder, I'm sure that these other, in Australia, I'm sure these other products did jump through these hoops as well. US, maybe not so much.
Australia's not that better. I looked into our TGA guidelines and it's all right. It's slightly a few steps forward. We don't like a few other ingredients that US likes, but it doesn't really say much about the process. And I know our store shelves are filled with probably slightly less junk than theirs, but it's pretty sad. Do you have any final good news stories? We're good. The episode is finito. We've got a lot going on in the next few weeks in terms of episodes. Some good ones coming out that are a little bit different. So we've got Steve Hendricks, which will be all about the science of fasting for those interested in that. And then we've got Matt Schlegel, which is talking about using a personality test to problem solve climate change. So a bit of an interesting perspective there. And finally, Tony Corrales, which will be all about vegan and sustainable business models. And then we have a special episode for you, which will be how to be vegan at Christmas time. So conversations to avoid, conversations to look for, and different wordings to use. So we're excited to plan that one for you guys. Timely, it'll be released a few days before Christmas. So make sure you check that one out. But with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. I hope you learned a thing or two and hope you danced when we have our good news and shrugged a little bit and maybe had a frown face and we'll talk about the bad news. But all is well here. We have got a good lineup and a lot of things to look forward to with COP28. If you like the podcast, feel free to leave us a review on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, all the good stuff. On YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Love all that. And until next week's episode, stay happy, eat plants. Peace.